And I was a young mother with 3 small children at home, and let me tell you, I was devastated when news came to my house that I had cancer. And I remember praying, my prayer to God at that time was, God, just let me live to raise my children. You know, I wanted to stick around to see them grow up, and I was concerned at that time, and the worldly things of this life didn't matter to me. The material things had no meaning. I just wanted to be here for my children. And God allowed me to raise my family, and now I have 6 beautiful grandchildren that I get to enjoy, and life is good. I'm so grateful, and I don't understand how, with the disease cancer, some people live and some people don't make it. I don't know why that is. But I do know in both instances that it's important to have a support team. While you're going through that, it's important to have people stick close to you. And if you're here tonight, you know, I don't know of any family in the world that hasn't been affected by cancer somehow. Even tonight in this crowd, you may be here and you're a survivor like I am. Yeah. Or perhaps you've lost someone really close to you from cancer. You may be here tonight and you're fighting right now. Or maybe you're just sitting really close to somebody and holding their hand and praying with them and telling them to hang in there. This song is a dedication to those of you here tonight that loved us through the disease.
Cancer don't discriminate.
you saw so many of our dear friends in Southern gospel music that have survived cancer or might be battling right now. And boy, I tell you, we could go on and on and on with pictures and pictures and stories of people that survive diseases and survive catastrophes, all kinds of things. And, you know, I've been praying about how to approach this. And when Mark called and asked if we would be a part of this wonderful event, and he told me the history of this storytelling event, I never considered myself a storyteller. And I've been talking about what's happened in my life since I became a Christian, and that's been about 40 years ago. But you know, I don't know. There's just so many stories involved. And I said, Lord, I would like for you to use me. And I thought about preparing some notes, and I thought about just writing down some things that I wouldn't forget. And I thought, no, I'm just going to follow the Spirit. Tonight, I'm just going to go by the leading of God, and I'm going to just be sensitive to how I feel like I need to tell you my story. But I am grateful that God gave me a second chance through cancer. I really am. And if you've ever been there, I know in a crowd this size, there are probably many of you that have battled, maybe not cancer, one disease or another, and you live to tell the story. And I thank God that I'm a survivor. Yeah. I thank God for the will inside of me to fight. And I think that I inherited a lot of that from my family, from my parents. Mark told you a little bit about, I was trying to listen from the side there about the Holocaust and all the things that happened, all the events, all the people that died in the war. And it isn't a fairy tale, friends. I know a lot of you know, and I've seen elderly gentlemen here that might have even served in the armed forces during World War II. I've met quite a few people that were very young men and walked into a lot of those concentration camps to help liberate my people, maybe my family. But I'm thankful tonight that God saw fit to spare my parents. And who knew that some 60 odd years down the road that I would be singing gospel music and praising the name of Jesus Christ. That's just the way God's ordained plan works. And who are we to question how that is? Because if you would have told me many years ago that I'd be doing what I am now, I probably would have called you crazy. It certainly was not a plan. But to start from the beginning, my parents are both Polish. They were both born in a place called Częstochowa, Poland. As young children growing up, my father was one of 7 children with a mother and father, and my mother was one of 5 children with a mother. Her father died when she was young. And when World War II broke out in 1939, they were living pretty normal lives with their families. Didn't have a whole lot, lived in farmland and tried to make ends meet, but a happy life. It was content. When the war broke out and news got out all over Europe that World War II the Germans were invading all over. It just seemed like a dream, and I guess everybody was worried about it, but they didn't really understand the atrocities that were about to happen. When the Nazis came into Częstochowa, Poland, my mother's told me this story. She said that her mother, my grandmother, must have known somehow that the Germans were coming in to take the Jews away. She must have heard it. They didn't have radios, they didn't have TV or internet, but word of mouth. She sent my mother and her 2 younger siblings to a neighboring town to buy some groceries. My mother said that she had a funny feeling. She was 14. When she got back, her mother was gone. She never saw her again. She also had a sister that was a little bit older than her that she helped take care of, that was crippled with some disease. I guess it might have been polio. She never could walk. But her sister Tsura was also gone. She never saw them again. Came back to an empty house that was ravaged and torn apart. Just a few days later, they got with neighbors and found out that the Germans, sure enough, had been in Częstochowa and they were coming back. But my mother and her younger siblings didn't know what to do. So when the Germans did come back into Częstochowa, they made everybody go out. This next story came from my father, who lives in the same town. Didn't know my mother, but lived in the same town. When the Germans came into Częstochowa, he said they got on loudspeakers and they yelled to all the people through the streets, said, everybody on the street, everybody out on the street, bring your belongings and come out on the streets. And they'd go into these houses and buildings and break all the windows and the glass, and if you didn't go outside, you were immediately killed. So all the people, thousands of them, running out on the street, and all the families huddled together with what little belongings they could grab. And that's when the soldiers started separating fathers from mothers, from children, mothers from babies. You here, and you here, and you here, and my mother was separated from all of her family. My father was separated from all of his family. Lying on the ground with his face to the ground, soldiers walking around for hours, never knowing what to happen. That was the beginning of their worst nightmare. My parents said that they were first taken to a ghetto in Poland, somewhere in some big school. They built fences, and these people they would feed them a little bit, and they would make them work, and word was around in these ghettos that they were just going to work a while, and when the war was going to be over, they were going to get back together with their families. And you know, I've often wondered why so many millions of people didn't rebel. You know, you'd think if you were going to get killed, why wouldn't you fight? I think I would. But they didn't know. They thought they were going to work a while and it was going to be okay, and then they were going to get out and there would be no trouble. But you see, that's where the Nazis had a plan. They decided they were going to make these Jewish people so weak that they couldn't fight. So it began as decent rations every day. Little by little went down to nothing. Till by the time my mother and father went to concentration camp, they ate one piece of bread a day and a little bowl of hot water with grass in it to give it a color. That was it. That's what you had to survive on every day. Sometimes if you didn't behave, you didn't even get that. People dying everywhere. Then the Nazis would come in and they'd move them from one refugee camp or one ghetto to another ghetto, till eventually they trained them to Germany. My mother and father said they took a train ride from Poland to Germany. Mom said for 3 days and nights they were in these trains packed in like cattle, standing room only. And no food, no water, no toilet facilities. People just dying and couldn't even fall down because there was no place to fall. But they survived that. My mother wound up in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. My father wound up in Buchenwald. 2.5 years they spent in the concentration camps, still not knowing anything about their families. My mother eventually caught up with her sister in Bergen-Belsen, who happened to be there. My father never met any of the rest of his brothers and sisters in camps at all. They lived through that until 1945. There's endless stories they've told me that happened in the war. My father was carrying bricks from point A to point B, and back again, back and forth, back and forth. And he got tired. He stopped for just a second. One of the soldiers walked by and picked up one of those bricks and hit him on the side of the head. He fell down on the ground, and he said he didn't know how long he'd just lie there bleeding, and everybody was afraid to help. But somehow he came to himself. He got up and started carrying the bricks again. My father passed away about 30 years ago. And I was able to view the body, and I saw that scar on his forehead. Just a reminder, a reminder. My father passed away telling me stories. My family, after the war was over, there were several organizations like United Jewish Appeal and B'nai B'rith came into Germany after our blessed American soldiers and British soldiers came in and liberated the camps. Mom said the soldiers looked like they were angels from God. They were starved, no place to go, didn't know anything. My father was 6 foot. Brother, and of course my father had one brother living, all the rest of his brothers and sisters and his parents were killed. And they were starting to make a life in Philadelphia. They got married there in the camp, in the French Army Relief Camp, and I was born then in 1947, and I brought a lot of joy to their life, they said. And then in 1949, my parents decided to make a journey to America. My uncle that lived in the United States lived in New York, and he sponsored my mother and father. So they got on a huge ship called the SS General Hahn, and we made the journey, the trip from Germany to America, and landed in New York City. Mom and Dad said when they saw the Statue of Liberty, that surely meant freedom. I was too young to remember it. I was 2 years old, but I do remember growing up in New York City with two wonderful Jewish parents who tried to give me everything they had been robbed of. I had a good life. I have a brother that was born 5 years after I was born here in America. And my parents tried to help me and teach me everything they could about life and love. But you know that Jewish people do not believe in Jesus Christ. The brother told a beautiful prayer a while ago, our Jewish brother. I don't know if he's still here, but yes. And he can vouch for this as well, but Jewish people are, they just don't understand that Jesus is Messiah. And of course, even though my parents, they taught me the best they knew, we didn't talk about Jesus. It was something we just didn't believe in. We didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I had no desire to know. It just wasn't in my brain. I didn't care. But all of my life growing up, knowing about the Holocaust tied me to the Jewish people. I wanted to rebuild the Jewish people. I wanted to go to Israel one day and work on a kibbutz. And I was proud of my heritage, and I was proud of being able to survive Hitler's atrocities and killing so many of our families. So I was very proud of that. So I didn't want to be a Christian. I didn't want to have anything to do with anything like that. But one day, I had an album come out on Columbia Records. I'd always could do a song and dance and sang. Long story. I worked in Greenwich Village, New York, because of an album that had come out on Columbia Records, which was an amazing accomplishment for a 19-year-old. And we did a 6-week engagement at a little coffee house in Greenwich Village, New York, called Gertie's Folk City. This was in the late 60s when the hippie movement was really going on, and I was a hippie. And it was fun, though, being in New York City at the time was a great time to be alive. And in that little coffee house, God placed a bluegrass band called the Greenbrier Boys. And in that band was a handsome banjo player named Joe Isaacs. And we called